Does everyone that enters need to hit the continue? It's okay to record.
Good morning, everyone. Hello. Nice to see you. Hello, hello. Looks like we have several people still joining us. Wonderful.
Thought we were going to have Judy Long.
We do actually, Elizabeth. We have Judy with
I'm not
us.
used to you on today. I'm used to you tomorrow.
You
No
have us
problem.
too.
You get all of us in one shot there, Elizabeth.
Hi, David. Nice to see
Hi.
everybody.
Happy to see everyone. Good morning. Good morning. So if anyone happens to be new with us today, just want to go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Shannon Elliott, and I'm the manager of our In Sync network here at PMD Alliance, and that is our network of support group leaders from across the country. So we have a couple of my colleagues on with us today as well. So there's Kelly and there's Rachel. So they're going to be helping out with the tech backend. As we all know, that's very important as we do Zoom to have a team effort. And so thanks to them for helping out today. And I just wanted to preface this. This is a program about grief and empathy. We have a wonderful guest speaker, Judy Long, with us today. And this Monday morning slot is usually dedicated to our support group leaders that we have in our network, like I mentioned. But I think that some of us here who are here today aren't necessarily support group leaders, and that's absolutely fine. It's totally great that we have you with us. And you can participate and learn and yes, so no worries, but just know that we are going to be kind of looking through that lens of being a support group leader with these topics of grief and empathy from this crazy year that we've had during COVID and all the isolation and challenges that we've been facing. So yes, just wanted to, preface that so we're all on the same page as we begin here. Let's see here. So Judy, well, before I introduce Judy, how about we all mute ourselves just so that we can be very focused and not have too many distractions with that background noise. So if you're new to Zoom, just go ahead, hover over your Zoom window, and in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, there's the mute button. And if you have any trouble with that, we might be able to help on our side as hosts and co-hosts. We can go ahead and click that mute button for you, just so we can stay nice and quiet. And then I believe we will be having some participation later a month with everyone. And so just know where that mute button is, and so that you do have the ability to talk and communicate with us. There is the chat feature as well, if you're more of an introvert and prefer to say something that way. We're always looking at that chat and monitoring it. So yes, so thank you, Rachel and David Cox, for demonstrating what that chat does. Okay, so Miss Judy, thank you so much for joining us. You're calling from California, I understand?
I am. I'm in San Francisco. How about everyone else? You could chat in where you're from. I won't ask you that question. I'd be driving you nuts if I did. Shall I jump in, Shannon, or did you have more introductory comments you wanted to make?
Okay. That is all I have. So please go ahead and feel free to take it away. Thank
you so much. Well, first, I just want to thank every one of you for being here. This is some familiar faces. I'm so happy to see those of you I know, and happy to meet those of you I'm just meeting for the first time. These are big topics. I was pretty excited when Shannon wrote to me and she said, "Oh, would you like to talk about grief and empathy?" I thought, holy cow, nobody ever asks me that. Usually they go, "Ooh, I don't want to talk about those things." But I think they're so important. And those of you who know me, we used to play this game with little kids when I facilitated a grief support group for families. We say, if you really knew me, you would know. And then people would say, ... And I would say, if you really knew me, you would know that I would say, these are all things that we should be teaching kids in kindergarten. I mean, thank goodness we can begin to learn them at our ages, but they're really helpful to us just in life, whether something really dramatic is going on, or maybe we can learn it before something dramatic is really going on. And that can help to stabilize us and bring us some sense of security within ourselves, that we have some tools, some skills to handle the hard stuff, right? Because I think there's one thing, without even knowing everyone here, because we're all in human bodies, we're all in human personalities, we all have hard stuff sometimes. That's just part of being human. Sometimes it's more dramatic than other times. We all know that. And sometimes I might have something personal and you may say that's nothing, but for me, it might be huge. But all of these things are real. So we all have hard stuff that happens, and it's kind of handy if we have some way of handling them. Of course, I would love to have you in an 8-week class. I realize I don't. So I was trying to struggle. Oh, I'm sorry. I realized I forgot something. Shannon very kindly said, would you like me to introduce you, or do you want to introduce yourself? And I said, oh, I'll introduce myself. And I was just about to totally skip that. So I will take just a moment to do that for those of you that I haven't met before. So I am by trade, if you will, by work, I'm a palliative care chaplain in San Francisco at a large teaching hospital. And for the last 7 years, I have worked in a very special clinic that we called a neuro-palliative clinic that was for people with advanced Parkinson's. And we also saw people with any kind of Parkinson's related disorder. So it may have been something quite different from Parkinson's, but related, like multiple system atrophy or PSP, Lewy body dementia. There are many. And then I also work in palliative care in our cancer clinic for outpatients with cancer. And of course, as all of us know, sometimes people have both. Sometimes they may not have either, but one of their family members does. So these are things that seem to cut across a lot of boundaries, if you will. In addition to being a chaplain, I do a lot of teaching, and I think that's how I landed here. So one of the courses that I've been teaching for about the last 7 years is for care partners of people with Parkinson's or other neurologic illnesses. Over the years, that's expanded. It's not just Parkinson's, it's not just movement disorders, but it may be someone with a brain tumor. Because something that affects the brain can affect surprising parts of us. It might affect our ability to speak, or our ability to have our cognition working in the way that we're used to. So I find that people with neurologic illness sometimes have a lot in common, even when their illnesses are quite different. So I teach care partners of people with neurologic illness, and I also teach people who are living with the illnesses. Right? And you may assume, but I want to make sure you know, I don't try to teach people about the science of the illnesses that they live with. Because as I always tell them, I'm not the scientist in the family. I'm really here to talk about how can I get through this stuff in a way that feels like I can handle it in some way. How can I get through it in a way where I just feel like I have some sort of a capacity to feel like my own sustainability is, I can't think of another word, but maintainable. You know, I can keep it going in a way where I'm okay. That's what I teach. So from that will be a lot of the things I'd like to talk with you about in here. And in the courses that I teach, I will say that I do teach a little bit, not the entire course, about grief and sorrow. So this isn't entirely different territory for me. And I always teach a lot about empathy for a reason. So let's start. Let me start with telling you what I'd like to do today, and then we'll jump in. So I always like to give people a chance to go, oh, is that what we're going to talk about? I think I'll pass. Or to say, yeah, great, I'm glad you're doing that. Or to tell me, hey, would you please also add this? So here's what I'd like to do. First, I'd like to lead you in a very simple practice where we just kind of settle our own minds from whatever we've been doing earlier today. Right? And that's a kind of a grounding practice. that is really one of the practices I find very useful. So I'd be sharing it with you for two reasons. I'd like you to do it as a way of arriving here today. And I'd like you also to be doing it, if you're not familiar with it, as a skill you can take away after the class is over. So that's the first thing. And then I'd like to really talk about empathy. And I don't mean that I'm going to be giving you a long lecture or anything like that, but I want to invite you to think about it. It's a word we all know and use. And I'd like to consider, what's it mean? And what's good about it? And what's not so good about it? And how can we make it healthy? How can we make it work well for us? And then we'll talk a bit about grief. We'll talk about it a little bit in the context of this crazy year that we all have been living through, and why it feels so crazy. Talk a little about that. And then I thought it would be useful to consider something that I believe is sometimes a little misunderstood, which is what's a normal way to grieve. And here's a spoiler, I'll tell you in advance. I don't think there is a normal way. There's no right way. There are a lot of ways to grieve. So I want to kind of out that and talk about that with you guys just a little bit. And then, because all of us have opportunities to grieve all kinds of losses, I thought it would be important and useful to talk a little about rituals, right? This is as opposed to pretending something's not so bad. You know, having some kind of ritual can be something small, but something that allows me to honor what was hard or what was lost in a way that feels good to me, to each of us. I think it's a personal practice. We can do this in community, and that's lovely. We can go to memorial services or conduct them ourselves. But we also, I think, need something within ourselves that lets us mark and honor the losses that occur so that we don't just pretend they're not happening. And I'd be willing to bet just about it. This is kind of crazy for me to bet anything about all of you since I don't know you, but I'd be willing to bet that almost all of you probably are really good at being strong and muscling through things. Does that resonate for anyone? Able to do that? Yeah. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Thank goodness we can do that. By the way, I'm a caregiver too. So if I couldn't do that, I'd be in big trouble, right? I need to be able to do that. But I also need to be able to mark the things that are hard in a way that's positive, in a way that lets me be better with it than I would be otherwise. So that's what I mean about that. And then the last thing I'd really like to touch on is a couple of, we'll see how much time there is, but I'd love to touch a little bit on gratitude practice, which is something many of you may be familiar with, but I want to explain why I think it can be useful and important just as a practice, because it shifts the way our minds are looking at something, and that can be useful. And then I'd like to talk about how we can set simple goals in our everyday lives. And don't get scared. I'll tell you right now, I don't like goals. I don't want someone to tell me to set goals, and I'm not usually very good at setting them or keeping them. But this is a little bit different. This is a practice where you think up something you think is fun that you could stand to do in the next week that you really would do, and then using that for a weekly goal or something like that. So I'm going to stop right there on that. That's my overview before I start. Are there questions or suggestions before I begin? And if you have one, would you unmute yourself and let me know? I had a teacher once who said, whenever she asks a question, she was teaching middle school age. She said she would always make herself count to herself 1 elephant, 2 elephants, 5 times before she would go on, give people a chance. So I'm not sure I did the 5 elephant trick, but nonetheless, I've talked long enough to be that long. So I'm going to start with just what I suggested. I'm going to jump in with a settling the mind practice or settling the body. That's a simple grounding practice. I'll share first that I learned this from some people that are trauma therapists. And maybe some of you have that kind of background. I'm not a trauma therapist, I learned it from a psychologist who is also a trauma therapist. And what she told me is that when she's talking with a client and they're telling her about something difficult, she will ask them in advance. She'll say, is it okay if when you're telling me about that difficult thing that you're here to talk about, if I notice that it looks like you're getting upset, maybe I'll see you're starting to breathe faster, or maybe your face is changing color a little bit, or maybe your heart looks like it's beating faster. Is it okay if I interrupt you? And when I do, I'd like to give you something to do that'll just help you calm your nervous system. And then you can start talking again if you want, or you can say, no, not today. I've had enough for today. Isn't that nice? I think that's a very civilized practice, but maybe we should all do. But this idea of being able to ground ourselves and calm our nervous systems, I think that's super useful. And it's something you can do. And you could tell someone, I need some time right now. But you know what? You don't have to. You can do this right in the middle of life, which is why I like it. So by way of introduction, what I'd like to share with you is this practice I'm going to show you is going to be asking you to notice something you can feel in your body. It's a physical sensation. There's a reason for that. The reason is this: the part of our brains that responds to threat, the part that goes, danger, danger, and it gets my heart start beating faster to kind of prepare me to run away or fight with somebody, that part of my brain does not respond to words. I could tell it all day long, oh, Judy's brain, please calm down. It doesn't get words, right? We always say we should tell little children, use your words, but we can't use our words with the part of the brain that responds to threat. For those of you that have some biology background, it's called the amygdala. It's just a part of the brain that responds to threats. You don't need to remember the name of that unless you want to. But what I want to do is I want to give the amygdala a signal. I want to give it a signal that I'm stable and I'm okay, and it can stop flooding me with adrenaline. Thank you. I've had plenty of adrenaline. You can stop giving me that adrenaline. Please desist. So I want to give it that message. How do I do that? If I can't do it with words, how do I do it? I can do it with how I feel in my body. The brain gets that. It's a very ancient part of the brain. It understands how I feel in my body a lot better than words. And that's why this exercise works. They've studied it, they being the neuroscientists and the psychologists, social psychologists. But I always say to anyone I'm teaching anything to, those of you that know me or have sat through my classes before will know this, I always say, try it out, see if this interests you at all. And if it does, practice it a few times on your own and just see for yourself if it works for you. I'm showing you something that works for me. It doesn't mean it'll work for you, but I can tell you how it works and you can try it. Okay, so that's a long intro. Now I'd like to let you have a chance to try it out. So if you would, please, if you're comfortable sitting, and those of you with your pictures on, it appears that you're sitting on a chair of some kind. You can be lying down for this, by the way. If some of you feel like you need to be lying down, that works as well. But I'm going to speak as though everyone's sitting because I can't see everyone. Would you please sway back and forth, maybe right to left a little bit, so that you can notice what it feels like to feel the support of the chair beneath your sit bones, right? You've been sitting here all this time and none of us has thought of this for a minute, right? Because I've been too busy yakking at you. But for just a moment, can you notice what that feels like? And then just come to center, just sit still without swaying anymore. Can you feel the pressure like from the chair beneath you? The weight of your body's on the chair. Can you feel the support of the chair beneath your sit bones? Can you notice that? Could you, those of you I can see, can you nod your head if you can feel that? Yeah, okay. And by the way, if you were standing up, I would ask you to do the same thing with the soles of your feet. It works that way too. And if you are lying down off camera, this works. You can say, can you feel the support of the mattress or the couch behind your back, behind your shoulders or your head? Right? In fact, there was a gentleman with Parkinson's that I used to do this with all the time. And he was always, he had to be lying down. I did it on Zoom with him. He would be lying down and we would do a body scan. Could he feel the support of the cushion behind his head? Can you drift your attention down and feel the support of the pillows behind your back? Nice, isn't it? I bet you think there's a part 2 and 3. There's not. That's the whole thing. That's it. I can add a second part. I often do, that has to do with the breath. But the particular practice in this case is shifting your attention into your body and allowing yourself to notice the sensation. Let me say it again. Notice the physical sensation of the support of the bottom of the chair beneath your sit bones. That's the practice. What do you think happens if you are already triggered and you're already super upset about something, and then you do this? What do you think happens to all that adrenaline? It's already coursing through your bloodstream. It's still there, right? Yeah. Did you have something, David? Were you saying something, or just showing me you're showing me it coming down? Yeah, got it. So it does begin to come down. And thank you for saying that. It's exactly what happens. The adrenaline level begins to decrease or dissipate, call it what you will. That heightened adrenaline response comes down. However, it helps if we know cognitively in our brains, it's going to take a little while for the adrenaline to dissipate. I better give this body I'm in a little bit of time, right? I'll do a grounding exercise to interrupt the stress response. And then I need to give this body a little time to calm down. What do you think will happen if I start going right back to what I was worried about before while I'm calming down? My amygdala is going to say, oh, don't worry about it, Judy. I'll just throw some more adrenaline into your bloodstream. That'll help, right? But I don't want it to do this. So I want to shift my attention to something else, at least for a moment, right? Or a couple minutes, to give this body some time for the adrenaline to dissipate. I say this to you for a reason. I want you to think of something right now. And I'll tell you what I want you to think of. See if you can think of something that you enjoy. And I think it'll be different for every one of us. See if you can think of something you know you like to think about because it makes you feel good, makes you feel happy. Could be a memory, could be a place in nature. It could be a religious figure, right? Could be a favorite grandparent that took care of you when you were 3. But what's something when you remember that you just feel good? It could be something nearby that you can pick up and read. Is there something you like to read? A poem, a Bible? I would say probably not a murder mystery at the moment, because what you want to do is something that's kind of a quick go-to that's fun for you, but also is maybe inspiring or nice for you to turn to. Do you like, for me, I like picturing the waves of the ocean, because when I was a little kid, that's where we went when I was little, and it makes me feel happy when I think of them. For my husband, he likes to think of the mountains. So I'm going to be quiet for a minute and ask you if you would, if you don't already have a paper and pencil nearby, would you get one out, please? And be able to just make a quick note. And I would suggest you write down 3 things that you think would work for you. So you have a choice. My experience is that when I'm the most upset, it's when it's the hardest for me to think of anything like that. That's why I want you to think of it now. Okay? So this might be, what do I want to keep on my night table to look at when I wake up in the middle of the night and I'm worried? Or. So I'll be quiet for a moment. You write down 3 things, please. And I wonder, I know we've got a large group here today. I don't know how this will work, but I wonder if you could, anyone that is willing to share. I always say in my classes, we learn as much from each other as we do from the person who's leading the class. So it always helps me when I hear from you, or a few of you perhaps, something that works for you, because it'll give me an idea I might not have thought of for myself. So is there anyone here that can tell me one of your 3 things that you're willing to say out loud? And you'd have to unmute yourself if you would, please.
You can do a little wave like this and we can know that you want to speak.
Yeah, great.
Sarah, if you'd like to unmute yourself, Sarah. There you go.
Okay, I'll go ahead and share. I put down snuggled in bed under one of my comforters, like burrowed down under.
That sounds so great. I would love that too. Thank you. I bet that's what a lot of us can relate to. Thank you so much. Anyone
Uh-huh.
else? Yeah, and just put your hand up if you have something, please. Yeah, do you want to
Freddie?
say?
Ready.
Yeah,
Hi,
Freddie.
Freddie.
Hi. I have a picture of my grandsons that's like a slideshow, and they dance and they'll sing, and you can hear the laughter in it too. So I love that one. I'll just sometimes sit and just watch that again and again.
That is so great. Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else? Does anyone have a pet, a cat or a dog? I wonder if that's the thing I think of. I would probably pat my lap and hope my dog would jump up without barking, but you never know. Yeah. Okay, I've
I
got
think
time for-
Elizabeth Sterling had her hand up. Does she
Oh,
want
good.
to? You're muted though, Elizabeth. Can you unmute?
I have cats,
You do. Great. Cats plural. That's wonderful. How many cats?
too, and they're sisters.
Oh, that's great. That's great. So
And
their
they
hand.
meow a lot, a lot. They talk a lot.
Okay. Talkative cats. This is great. Siblings. Thank you, Elizabeth. Okay, so I think we all have these things. What I find when I'm in the hospital working with people, number one, we can't really picture those things very easily in the hospital. So it's a little bit of a stretch. We'd have to stop and remember. But isn't it interesting? As much as I might want to pet my dog, or as much as I might want to snuggle under a comforter, thank you, Sarah, or any of these kinds of things. And thank you for that moving picture of your grandchildren, Freddie. Sometimes I might be someplace where I don't have those things with me, right? And I just want to remind each of us that even just bringing that memory to mind and visualizing what that would be can help actually ground our nervous systems and settle us down again. Isn't that nice? So it'd be lovely to be right where we can do those things. But let me suggest to you, don't think that that's off the table just because you're somewhere where you don't have those things handy. Yeah, memories are our brain just gets it. If I'm picturing the ocean, or if I were you, Freddie, and I were picturing my grandchildren dancing and singing and laughing, my brain would start feeling good. It would start calming down. So I think that's a very interesting quality, and it's very much worth practicing. We spent a heck of a lot of time on grounding. Let me give you one more part to go with it, maybe two, and then we'll move. So you can add a breath to it. For those of you that are comfortable noticing the breath, and only if it's okay with you. If you know that the breath is not comfortable for you, you can skip this part, okay? But if the breath is comfortable for you, on the next in-breath, would you please notice the sensation of the air entering your nostrils? Go ahead and do it right now. Breathe in, please. Can you feel that? Could you nod your head to let me know? Could you feel that sensation? Okay. So again, do you notice that I'm asking you to feel a physical sensation? It's the same reason. The brain knows that you're feeling a physical sensation. You can combine that with the grounding. So part one, I'm going to ask you to breathe in, notice the sensation of the air entering your nostrils. During the out breath, let the breath take care of itself. Drop your attention into your body. Notice the sensation of the support of the chair. Right, coming right back to that one again. So let's try it. On the next in-breath, please breathe in. Notice the air entering your nostrils on the in-breath. During the out-breath, allow your attention to drop into the body. Notice the sensation of the support of the chair. Okay, so let's drop that one for now. Just know it's there. You can come back to it and practice it anytime you want. And I'd like to move on. And we have some other grounding practices that are quite nice, but we'll see how the time goes. Let's keep it to this one for now and move into empathy. So I wonder if anyone can tell me what you think is a common definition in your mind of the word empathy. What's that mean? Anyone? And again, you could raise your hand, but please unmute yourself.
Elizabeth, I saw, there you go.
Having, understanding someone else's feelings.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Exactly that. Understanding someone else's feelings. Or I sometimes I hear people use the expression, putting myself in someone else's shoes. Have any of
Yeah.
you ever heard that? Yeah, pretty much the
Yeah.
same. Yeah, thank you. And so that is the definition in everyday language, right? For every one of us. There are people who study empathy just like it's a bug under a microscope. They study it a lot and they wonder, well, where is that in our bodies? Where's it come from? And what's it all about? And how does it work? And what's good about it and what's bad about it? I think I'll ask you that question first, though. So could you get your paper and pencil out again, please? And could you write down on it one thing in your mind? What do you think is good about empathy? What's one thing that's good about empathy for you as someone that feels empathy? And let me just preface it by saying that the scientists tell me everyone has empathy unless they have a disability about empathy. Otherwise, everybody's got some empathy. And we also can learn empathy. But for a moment, from your own experience, what's something that you think is good about having empathy? Okay. I'm going to hold just a second with it because I'm going to come back to that. Now I want you to write down something that's just the opposite. What do you think might be hard about having empathy? What might be the hard part of having empathy? And what I'd like to ask you to do for a moment, you're thinking about your own lives. I'd like to ask you to talk with someone else about what you find useful and helpful about empathy and from your experience and what you found hard. And I'm going to make this a fairly brief, excuse me, I'm going to clear my throat. Thank you. I don't know if I did such a good job, but it seemed to work. So I would like to invite you to be in, I see some people are writing in the chat. Thank you very much. Connecting or feeling another's pain. Very much so. So could I ask you to be in a breakout pair for just a few moments and take 3 minutes each if you're in a pair or 2 minutes each if you're in a triad. I never know how the numbers will work out in these things. And take turns and let one person tell the other one good thing about having empathy and one difficult thing, and then switch. Okay, does that sound all right? And then we'll come back and talk in the larger group.
Great. So Judy, I'm seeing that there are maybe half of our participants don't have their video on. And so I don't know if they're able to participate in a breakout room or not. I'm wondering, what
Why
if we
not?
had a few? Yeah, I'm not sure. We could try. And if anyone gets into a room where no one's there or they're not responding, you can always come back to the main room and I can try to assign you to a different room. It's just going to be a little tight on time. That's the only thing. So if you do have the ability, if you're hearing me, if you're out there, go ahead, turn your video on and I know you're there. Otherwise, I know you might be working, you might be multitasking, and you might not be able to talk, but we do want you to participate if possible. So I still see a number of people without video. So I can put people into 2 or 3 in a room. And then, like I said, if you get to a place and you're ready to talk, but no one else is there, come on back to the main room and I will move you to a different breakout room. Does that sound good to everyone? Okay, I'm gonna try to do this now. Here we go. And then I need to, so Judy, would you like to not go into a room or do you want to participate?
No, I won't go in a room.
Okay, so I need to do a little finagling here. And then I'm gonna not have Rachel and Kelly. So Rachel and Kelly, where are you? There we are. Okay, so looks like I've got either 2 or 3 people in each room now. And here we go, everyone. Judy, Kelly, and Rachel, you can just come back to the main room. Here we go. Sorry about that. A
Yeah.
little late.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Freddie. You said it can be.
It gets too close. I had an uncle who was dying of Parkinson's, and I had just lost my husband. So it was too close to, and I couldn't share with the family. So I just kind of like backed away.
Yeah. Thank you so much. You've really named something that happens so often for so many of us. So empathy is this, I'm seeing somebody wrote something in the chat, but I can't quite read it. Give me a second. It's from
Offers me
Trace.
a chance to be a more active listener.
Ah, thank you.
That
That's
is
such a
very
great
true.
one. Very true. And that's the thing that I find about empathy. Well, let me stop for a moment. Are there more things anyone would like to share? Sarah?
Yes, I put down makes you a kinder person is the good part.
Yeah.
And then the hard part, it could make you feel overwhelmed. And Andrea had a good point where she said that it helps her to be understood. So she was looking at the other side of it as being the receiver of empathy,
Yeah.
which I didn't even think about.
Yeah. It's
know.
both ways, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, it
Thank you.
does.
Yeah. Anyone else? Anything that you would like to throw into the swimming pool here? Okay.
It makes it hard for us to accept empathy to ourselves, for ourselves.
Can be hard to accept it when someone else is feeling empathic towards us. Maybe it depends how it's being offered.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggie.
Yeah. It's a tricky one, isn't it? It's very delicate stuff. Yeah. So, Rachel, were you raising your hand?
Yeah, I just wanted to say one of the negative things or kind of reiterate that it can hurt your heart. You know, you're taking on so much of other people's pain and suffering, and it really affects your heart and happiness sometimes.
Yeah. Thank you, Rachel. And thank you for, I love that expression. It's so simple, but it's so moving. You say it hurts your heart, because I think that's something most all of us have experienced in some little way or bigger little way, but it's not unfamiliar. So empathy is this, well, first let me ask, has anyone here ever heard of the term compassion fatigue? Has anyone heard that? It's something they
Yes.
write about in the news. Yeah, it's pretty common term now, I think. For a while there
Yes.
was like, what's that? Thank you. And who's saying yes? Somebody, I can't catch it. Anyway, somebody said yes. Thank you. So the people that research compassion are generally go by the title social psychologists, and they're all over the world. And compassion's been studied a lot in the last 20 years. Used to be something that was just sort of on a shelf somewhere, but there have been a lot of people studying it, and they say, well, actually, there's no such thing as compassion fatigue. And of course, I looked at them and said, excuse me, of course there is. And they said, no, it's empathy fatigue. It's empathic distress. It's empathy that's getting in trouble. Our compassion, the fact that we care, is still there, but it's the empathy that's getting overwrought, if you will, that's getting into trouble. It's interesting, isn't it? So, I mean, this is, I thought, is this just semantics? What are we talking about here? They said, well, it's this quality of feeling like I can get it, how somebody else feels. You know, I sort of understand how someone feels. That's the quality that they say can get kind of into trouble when it gets too strong. So they say if we get so empathic that we not only care about someone and kind of understand how they feel, but we almost feel the pain too. Have any of you ever felt that? It's sort of like you're not that person, but kind of can feel the pain. I remember one time, and this is a silly example, but I've remembered it for many years because it was so strong. I was in my 20s at the time. I was married then to my first husband. He was having his wisdom teeth pulled. It's not a big deal, right? It's kind of a healthy procedure, if you will, not a bad one. I was sitting in the waiting room, supposed to be an hour. He's in there 3 or 4 hours. Apparently they were impacted and they had to break him. And I didn't know all of that. I just know I was sitting there and sitting there and sitting there. And I remember thinking, this is crazy. I almost feel like it hurts me. I could feel pain, or it was a very surprising feeling to me. I thought, why am I feeling this? You know, I'm just here to give him a ride home and make sure he's okay. But I actually felt like I was feeling some of the something, whatever it was not a good feeling. And I was very aware of it. And I think that happens all the time when I'm in hospital with people. It might be a family member, it might be a clinician, doctor or nurse, but when they feel someone suffering very, very, very strongly, then it can hurt their heart, just like what you're saying, Rachel. It can be that sort of a feeling. So what do you do about that? And sometimes the things that are taught are not that helpful. So one of the things that are sometimes taught to people is, oh, you should make sure you don't feel too much, or you'll never be able to do this kind of work, give this kind of care. If you feel too much, it's just going to pull you down. It's going to hurt you. And my brother, okay, he's even older than I am. My brother, when he went to med school, that's what they taught doctors. They weren't saying don't be empathic, but they were saying you don't want to care too much because you'll never be able to be a good doctor. You'll be too involved and it'll hurt too much. You won't be able to do that. Now, what they found more recently when they study this stuff with empathy and compassion, they say that's not actually very helpful. If we armor our hearts, that's what one of my teachers likes to call it. If we armor our hearts to keep ourselves safe, then we're separating ourselves from why we want to do this, give this kind of care. We're separating ourselves from allowing ourselves to feel. So the question is, how can I feel and not get overwhelmed? How can I bring empathy into a place where it's balanced so I can keep my heart open and I can still be stable? That's a really important thing, I think, in terms of skills any one of us can use in our everyday lives, in our care for our partners, in our care for, if we're in work, we're caring for people professionally, in our professional care. But I just think it's important, this idea of, well, what's that mean? How do I balance myself in the middle? What would it take for me to become balanced right in the middle of being present with suffering? So our empathy allows us to get at how somebody else feels. How cool is that? That's what lets us understand how our partners feel, our spouses, our kids, our parents, if they're still living, our siblings, our friends. If I have one of my friends telling me about something hard for her, I'll go, oh, and I sort of feel like, oh, I know that really hurts. I'll get it too. I'll feel it too. And it allows me to reach out and be close with her. I love that. And yeah, sometimes somebody can offer empathy that's a little too strong, but if somebody's just saying, I'm here with you, I get it that hurts, that can feel good. That can connect me instead of isolating me, right? So this idea of connection in a healthy way is super important. And we don't typically know ways of doing this. How do I stay balanced in the middle of it? I will give you an image to keep that I love. One of my teachers said this one too. It goes like this. She said, what we need to have is a soft front and a strong back. She says, not the other way around. You don't want to have an armored heart, a strong front, because then you can't feel right. And you don't want to fall apart if you have an open front. So you want to have an open front, meaning an open heart, an ability to feel, but still know that we have this strong back of equanimity, call it what you will, of stabilization, of being grounded, so we don't get swept away. I have a friend, but she had something happen years ago. I always remembered this. She was volunteering at the San Francisco General Hospital, which is a hospital where there's a lot of suffering, a lot of difficult things. And she loved doing it. Now, when she was doing this, she was in her 40s. So she was not a 20-year-old, right? She's a pretty stable person, pretty smart, stable person. She'd go up there and she would volunteer as a volunteer chaplain, right? And she'd go there 2 nights a week for 2 hours each time, or maybe it was 3 hours. And she had to drive half an hour to get to the hospital, half an hour to get home. And I found out after about halfway through the year, she would cry the whole way home, every time, because she would get so upset by what she was seeing, and she would manage to suck it up while she was there, and she'd get in her car and she'd start crying. She'd cry for a half hour. She learned to work with that over time, but she didn't have those skills initially. That's how it struck her. Yeah. Now that's not somebody in there for her professional work. Professional work was different form of science research, but that was what happened when she would go in there and do that. So how to balance, how to find balance. There are many ways, there are different skills. I won't be able to teach all of them to you today, that's for sure. But maybe there are a couple things that I can suggest to you that you could try out. One of them is just the grounding practice you just did. That's easy, right? What would you have to do this though? Can you notice? Let's say that again, because this is so important. Can you notice when you're starting to feel a little bit too much empathy, maybe a little bit overwhelmed, a little bit tipped over? Can you notice that? Or can you notice if you're starting to back away, like, well, I don't want to get too close to that? Can you notice it? So probably if I didn't teach you a single thing the whole time we're talking, if I just taught you one thing and you got this would be really important. If you notice what's happening, then only then you can choose what you do next. If you don't notice, I always say it's like being down the rabbit hole. If I don't notice what's going on, I'm just going to react, whatever has been my habitual way of responding since I was 10 years old. That's what I'll do. There'll be no choice in it. I'll just be bling, I'll just be doing whatever I do. But if I notice, then I can say, oops, I don't need to think about it a lot. I don't need to analyze it, but can I just feel however it feels in my body when I'm getting a little bit too sucked in or too distanced? If I can notice either one of those going to extreme a little bit, I want to come back. There's a term that is, I think there's a book that's called this, emotional intelligence, or whatever it is. I always think of it as being, what that means is, can I notice and can I make adjustments in myself that will help me be a little more in tune with where I think I should be, where I need to be, where I can be more okay. I want to come back to feeling okay if I can. So how do you practice that? What are the skills? I'm looking at my notes to remind me. How do you practice that? I'm going to look at my clock for a minute. Let's see. It's almost 10. We've got until 10:30. Okay. So before I say anything more, is there anything anyone would like to ask or say about this before I think of some practices to share?
I'd like to say something, Judy, if I may.
Please.
Yeah, what you're talking about, the notice, that's, I feel like a skill, that self-awareness is what I have learned through meditation practice, is being able
Lucky
to
girl.
have that observer perspective, and to see myself and to see my thoughts and my emotions, and then being able to choose, like you said. So that's been a very important process and learning process for me, life-changing.
Really glad that worked for you, Shannon. That's great. And anybody that might feel inclined toward that kind of practice, and if you've already tried it out, you might try it again. And if you hadn't, you might like to try it. But I will say most of the people I work with don't meditate and might not even want to. So I'm always looking for other ways people can do something like what you're referring to, Shannon. And I'm really happy that you have that. I think it's really important. And I'm happy that it's helped you. You can't understate that. It's a super important kind of a skill.
How long is this meeting?
This meeting goes till 10:30, if I understand it correctly. Is that right?
Oh,
Yes.
wow.
This is an hour and a half.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Is that okay, Elizabeth? Please.
Oh,
if you-
yes, that's
Oh.
terrific.
Oh, thank you. I was going to say, it's still not very long for me because I could keep going on this stuff, as you probably can tell. But for anyone that feels like you've got deadlines that you thought it was a shorter meeting, please feel free. So do you remember what I was saying a little bit when we were talking about, a little bit ago, when we were talking about grounding, how important it can be to notice something with your body So that tells part of the brain that it can calm down. So I'm going to, I have three thoughts at once. Now that you said a half hour, Elizabeth, I'm starting to think of the different things. What do we want to do in this half hour? Let me think about it. So one thing I'd like to suggest to you and remind you is this. When you are with someone, if you can notice that you're starting to feel a little off balance, it is helpful if you can bring yourself back into your body and do something that, how would you do that? How do you bring yourself back into your body? Well, you can breathe in and notice the support of the chair. And you want to know what else you can do? Try this out. If you are okay, if your body's okay with your feet on the ground, try pressing, let's say one of your feet, let's say your left foot, try pressing it a little bit harder toward the ground. Can you feel the support of the ground beneath your left foot? You could do both feet, but I'm just using one. Try your left foot. See if you can notice that. Can you notice that? As soon as you feel that, your brain goes, oh, Judy's back in her body again. You may not go through all those thought processes, but I will stop being merged with the other person, even if I'm still listening to them, talking to them, attending to them, paying attention to them. But my body remembers that I'm separate. The word that the psychologists like to use for that, or many of them, is differentiation. Helps me differentiate this self from the person that's suffering. Helps me not to get too sucked in so that I'm feeling it so strongly that it's overwhelming me. So this idea of being able to differentiate is really important. And how we can do it varies. There are lots of ways of doing it. But one of the ways that's the simplest is doing something that brings me back into my body. It could be pressing my foot to the floor. It could be noticing the support of the chair. Where I knew someone I used to talk to, she led meditation retreats, Shannon, that were 3 months long. And she would have people that would come to her all through the retreat and have little interviews with her and tell her about all her problems. So that could be kind of hard to hear. And I said, well, what do you do? And she said, oh, I just hold my hands like this. I said, really? What's that? What good does that do? She said, well, I just squeeze my hand a little bit. It reminds me, it just reminds my brain that I'm in this separate body. It helps me to differentiate. It's useful, isn't it? Kind of nice. So those are simple ways. There are other ways of doing this sort of thing, but I want to be mindful of time. And I'm just trying to think how much we want to do right here and still have time to talk about grief a little bit. I don't want to leave that one behind because I think it's an important topic. Right? So there. I'm going to suggest two simple things to you that are useful as you begin to, if this is before you're about to be a group leader, or if you're not a group leader, before you're about to meet with someone for any reason that you think this might get a little bit hard. This might get a little emotional or a little stressful for me. And I want to make sure that I am kind of stable and I don't get swept away in the middle of this. What can I do to help myself out? So here are two simple things. One you already did. You can ground yourself. I had to talk about it for 5 or 10 minutes, but how long did it take you to do it? One breath. You breathe in, you notice how the sensation of the air entering your nostrils. Breathe out, you drop into your body. 1, 2. It's that fast. Here's a second one. I'd like you to ask yourself a question, and I'm going to ask you to bring to mind an imaginary, well, or a very real remembered situation where you were about to meet with someone or visit with someone, or if you're a group leader, to lead a group. If you're not a group leader, maybe to have a visit with one of your relatives or to attend a group. But you know, something's going to be going on in there that might be a little bit stressful for you, whatever it is. I'd like you to stop and remember something. So ask yourself this question. Bring to mind a situation where you're about to meet with somebody for some reason or another. You make it up. Remember the situation if it's a remembered one. And then think to yourself this. Ask yourself this question. Why am I really here? Let's say it again. Why am I really here? So this doesn't mean I'm really here for my 9 o'clock doctor's appointment. Doesn't mean I'm really here so that I cover my shift at work. It means, why do I care? Why do I want to be here? What is it within me? Whoops, my hikers are just back. So you're going to hear my husband hooting and my dog maybe barking. Sorry. But I think you're probably understanding quite well that what I'm asking you is a much bigger question than you're hearing my dog's jingles, aren't you? I'm sorry. Okay. So I'm asking you a much bigger question than what is it that you're doing right now? I'm asking you a bigger question than are you making lunch right now? Or are you going to the doctor's? I'm asking you, why do I care about what I'm doing? What is it within me that really is a way of grounding yourself, that grounds me in what I'm doing? Maybe it's meeting with your spouse. Maybe it's meeting with your grandchildren. Why do I really care? Is it because we're playing a game together, or is it because I love them? So what I want you to come into in your own heart is, why am I really here? Why is this important to me? Why does this matter? And I would suggest to you that research has shown, I'm not suggesting, I'm letting you know, research has shown that this is incredibly important as something that will nourish and ground you if you allow yourselves to remember that. It's not a luxury and it's not a small thing. So I'm going to say that again. It's very easy to blow off. That doesn't matter. I don't need to do that. I always know I love them. I don't need to think about it. Bring it onto your radar. Let yourself understand your greater than self reason for why you care about what you're doing. And if you're in this kind of thing professionally, let yourself think of that. Why am I really here? It's not so that I can cover the shift and I can get everyone's medicines, or I can teach this group, or whatever it is. Why am I here? Why do I care? Yeah, thank you very much, Shannon, for saying, why do I care about what I'm doing? Why am I really here? So thank you for repeating those questions. Use that in conjunction with your grounding practice as another way of really stabilizing yourself, right? Let that be a way that it's a foundational practice that allows you to be really ethically grounded in what you're doing because you care. What does that look like? It's a beautiful practice. Let me say this. It is not a one and done. It's a question I would invite you to hold for the rest of your lives. Keep coming back to it. It might feel different one day than another, but it's a beautiful practice. And it's one of the most important ones I could begin to share with you. And I would love for you to have it as yours. So here are two more. I'm looking at the clock, it's 10:07. So another one might be this. Books, let me stop. Questions about that one? I'm going to pause for a second just to say this. Could I suggest that if you haven't written it down already, write down on your piece of paper, why am I really here? Why do I care about what I'm doing? And allow that to be like some little saying that you come back to again and again. So, because I'm going to move ahead to something else, I don't want you just to forget it. I forgot what we did. See if you can remember what we did, if you want to. Okay. So this next one I think is so much fun. I love this. I used to teach this sometimes to doctors and nurses. And when I did, I would joke with them. I said, you want to know when you're walking into a room to see a patient who's walking in the room with you? And they'd look at me like, what's she talking about? And then they'd say, well, yeah, I had my residents with me, and I had one of the fellows and one of the medical school students. I said, no, that's not what I'm talking about. I want you to know this. Who are you right now when you're walking into this room? What version of you is walking into this room? And I would say that's true for any of us about any interaction. What version of me is present right now? So let me out myself to say this about myself. Who do I think is with me when I walk into a room? I generally think, oh, this is me. This is my best version of me walking into this room to have this conversation. I always think that. I don't even think it. I just feel it. I'm my best self. Is that true? Probably not. There are probably all kinds of things that are affecting me. So here's the practice. You very quickly go through 3 things And none of these will surprise you. And again, I'm going to talk about it for a couple minutes. You can do it in just a breath or two. But doing a quick scan, what's going on in my body? What's going on in my emotions, or I'll say heart. That's my abbreviation for emotions right now. What's going on in my body, my heart, and my mind? And I'd like you to do it in a particular way. I'd like you to think, well, I'd like you to do it in a particular way when we get to the part that's the mind, because that one's always a little tricky. So let's start with the body. When you're thinking about how am I in my body right now, it's simply acknowledging and noticing, has nothing to do with changing it. I'm not asking you to be magical, no magical thinking. I'm not going to make this stomach ache or backache or headache disappear just because I've noticed it's there. I just want to notice it's there. So when I start talking to Freddie, I'm aware that I have a headache and that I need to be a little bit more careful about what comes out of my mouth. So I'm not being an impatient person because my head hurts. So I just want to notice so that I can adjust a little bit if I want to, right? And then I want to notice what's happening in my emotions or my heart. So usually that's the part we suck it up. We don't pay attention to any of those things. I don't pay attention if I have to go to the bathroom. I don't pay attention if I'm worried about something, but just allowing myself to be aware what's going on right now. Maybe it has nothing to do with the person I'm talking with. Maybe I'm talking with Kelly. And what I'm worried about it is my brother back in Boston. She doesn't know that. Is that on my mind? You bet it is. Right? So I just want to notice, oh, the Judy that's walking into the room with me right now is actually a little bit, perhaps a little bit worried or a little bit distracted by something that's on my mind. And then the mental part, always a little bit tricky to remember what are my thoughts or to notice them. Because if you're like me, I have a monkey mind that always thinks about a million things at once. Or I had one person in a retreat with me. I love this. She was a young clinician. I think she was a doctor. I can't remember for sure. And she was a young mom. And she called it, she said, sometimes I really have this Chihuahua mind. And I used to think that was so funny. I've heard monkey mind a million times. I've never heard Chihuahua mind. And sometimes that's exactly how my mind feels. So if you have a Chihuahua, my hat's off to you, but that's what I think of when I think of Chihuahuas. So for the mind, the way this was taught to me, and I love this, they said, no, you don't need to go into all of your thoughts. You don't need to analyze your thoughts. It's nice if you can notice what's happening in your mind. But one thing in addition, very useful. Can I notice what kind of stories I have that are going on in my mind right now maybe about the person I'm about to talk to, maybe about the situation where I am, maybe about what happened yesterday. But what are the stories? Because they're probably also part of the me that's walking into the room. Maybe I walk into the room to see David, and all I can remember is yesterday David yelled at me. I'm joking, David. I have a brother named David. He usually doesn't yell at me either, but I like to use the name David as my example for that sort of thing. So let's say if David yelled at me and I'm about to meet with him, part of me goes, oh, I'm going into that room with that guy that yelled at me. I'm not sure I feel very good about that. He may not feel that way at all today, not even a little bit. Maybe he had a good reason to yell, who knows? But the thing is, I want to be able to drop some of those assumptions. And I also want to realize that's affecting what I'm thinking. And then very quickly, once you do that, right, how long did it take me to talk? 5 minutes? 10? How fast can you do it? 1 minute? Half a minute? Try it right now, just for a second. See if you can quickly notice in your own bodies now, how do you feel? Were you up all night last night? Did you eat any breakfast, lunch, supper, depending on your time zone? Right? Do you wish you'd taken a break, had a bio break and didn't get one? Is that distracting you? Distracts me when I don't get one. How about, are you hungry? I think I said that one already. What's going on in your emotions? Are your emotions distracted because of something else going on in your life? And the third one, since I asked you to do it right now, it's hard, we're on the screen. What are your stories about what? I think I'll have to let that one go and let you do that in your imagination. Otherwise, I'd be asking you to say, what are your stories about me? And that's me talking a mile a minute at the same time. So I want to try that one. So let's say you're interacting now with someone, you've gone into the room, you've grounded yourself, you've thought, why am I really here? You figured out how you're doing in your body, heart, and mind. As you begin to talk with someone else, you may, if you wish, consider knowing full well that you can't know what's going on inside someone else. That's just pure respect and humility. I know I can't. I don't know how you're doing. I can guess, but I don't really know. But as best you can, when you're about to interact with someone, sometimes it's useful to bring to mind, what do I think is going on for that person? Depending on your relationship, you will know more or less. And even then, you still don't know for sure. Right? So always worth bringing that kind of clinical humility or respect to a relationship, saying, I don't know. And yet I might be able to tell pretty well. Example, my husband who just got home, well, he's got kind of a gimpy knee. I wonder how he's doing. Maybe I go in and say, hi, did you have a good time? And all he's thinking is, can I get some ice in a hurry on my knee, right? Or maybe something happened while he was out. You know, oh, I had a great hike, but I'm really upset because the dog, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, I don't know what it will be. But the fact is, again, it's bringing that, I don't know how someone else is doing. And I'm going to bring a little bit of that quality of not knowing to what's going on. And that will help ground me as well. Notice that what we've done was scanning ourselves and scanning as best we can the other person. Does that help us differentiate? You bet it does. Right? Helps us not to get merged, not get too sucked in. You can always come back to the grounding. So I want to come back to, a simple breath process. This is nice. There are lots of ways of doing this that are different, but I'm going to give you a very simple one that I like, that I learned in a particular course. I teach this one too. I learned to teach it though. It's called Mindful Self-Compassion. And it's a way of using the breath to focus on yourself and focus on the other person. Even while you're in with them, you can take a breath in for yourself and out for the other person. Now there's another practice that's a little trickier, working with the breath with in for the other person, out for you, but we won't do that right now. What I'd like you to do is this. Imagine someone that you know that's having a hard time right now for some reason. Could be a friend, a family member, a patient that you work with, any of the above. And just in your normal breath, again, only if you're okay noticing the breath, take a breath in and imagine when you breathe in that it's a breath in for yourself, in for me, a breath in that's grounding, that's stabilizing, that's caring. Breathe in for me. You could imagine it compassion or love, in for me. And when you breathe out, you're imagining this other person out for you. So you're sending a breath of love, a breath of compassion, a breath of warmth. Right? So it's not magic. It's not like we can assume that other person can tell what I'm doing. It's not like I'm going to tell them what I'm doing, because I don't want to distract them, and they may not want me to do that. This is really for me. It's to help me stabilize. So I want to come back into that differentiation and at the same time a stabilization. And a very simple way to do it can be a breath in for me and out for you. Brings me back, notice, into my body. If I'm breathing in for me, it's physical sensation. I can feel it. Out for you, wishing you well. Am I wishing magic? Am I wishing I could make you all okay right now? Probably can't. I probably wouldn't believe that if I said that to myself. But can I believe that I wish for your well-being? Yes, I do wish for your well-being. In for me and out for you. In for me and out for you. So these are all balancing techniques. And we have precious little time to talk about a few more things before the end of our class. I probably allowed myself to think we could do more than we really could. But I don't want to forget this because I think it's so important. I'd like to come back to a couple of things. One is how crazy this year has been. And I'm just saying that to acknowledge it. Right? It has been more than a year, a crazy more than a year, right? I still remember the very beginning when I said, oh, well, in 2 months when this is over, right? Did any of you do that? I did. In 2 months when this is over, I actually was making plans for 2 months when this is over, and then 3 months when this is over. And then we had so many layers of things. It's like, how could there be this? And also, what's going on in the world and also what's going on in the politics. It was so many things that it was truly overwhelming, really, truly overwhelming. And then there were personal losses within that, right? Maybe we lost someone in our own families who was sick. Maybe we couldn't be with them when we normally would be. Maybe we did memorial services online. I've conducted a few of those. I visited someone who was dying in a hospice online. Try that. Their son's there. These are things none of us have ever done. Or at least we hope we never would do. And it can be very painful. And yet we can reach out to people in ways we've never reached out before and care in ways that we haven't before. So I think it's worth considering how much we've been able to connect and care within this crazy world that has been happening, and how much it's not going to feel over, even if right now, even if magically everyone in the world were 100% vaccinated, whatever that means, for every variant, even if that were true. We have the backlog of the feelings that we've experienced for the last 12, 13, 14, whatever it is, months. That's not going to just evaporate. Doesn't mean that we have to still feel the same way we felt then, but I think we'd be foolish not to notice that that's real, and that we deserve time to heal ourselves and to heal the people we love in whatever ways make the most sense to us. And that might take some thought and some care. Sometimes the best way we can do that is just by acknowledging and understanding that that's going on as part of our world right now. And thank you, Mary. Oh, it's so great to hear from all of you. Thank you. We've got 10 more minutes if you have time to stay on. You're very welcome. And if you don't, I understand completely. So I wanted to, as we say in chaplaincy, lift that up. And I know we could spend a whole class just on what I just said. I know that. But I want to at least lift it up to say this is part of who we are and part of our world, and make sure that we all give it full honor, if not in this moment, in this class, in our lives, in our real world, and not assume or expect someone else is okay because we think they should be, right? They may not feel that way. We may not feel that way. And also, now I'm going to come to the subject that I wanted to talk about a little bit, which is what the heck is grief and what's the normal way of grieving. And, you know, the best thing I can say to you in a short phrase is there is not a correct right way to grieve. There is not a correct right number of stages. There is not a correct right number of moments it takes till I'm going to feel better or someone else is. That's not true. It's not true. At least not in my experience. And I think each one of us is the experience of who we are is different when we go into a situation. The experience of what we've experienced is different for every one of us. Right? I don't think we can put a label on it. I don't think we can put any kind of expectations on it. I think we can honor it. I think we can care for it and care for each other. And I want to come back to a word that I said a little while ago, how we connect with others. I think I said it in that exercise of how am I doing? How's the other person doing? That's all relational stuff, right? This idea of connection is something that we as humans are hardwired to do. It's funny, huh? Right? I thought about this. I thought, why would that be? I think it's because human beings were not built with big, long claws and saber teeth like a saber-toothed tiger. Maybe we feel like some of our friends are like that. I don't know. We're not friends are like that, but we're not built that way. So how have humans survived over the millennia? How? We've survived by reaching out to each other. It would be me saying, oh, this is too hard for me. I'm going to reach out to Kelly. Kelly, can you help me with this one? You know, even if I feel like, yeah, I can handle it, you know, that's what humans have done. We affiliate, we connect, we care for each other. Our bodies even reward us. Do you know that when you care for someone else, that not only is it good for us emotionally, but our bodies like it? Our bodies will say, oh, good job, Judy. You're taking care of someone. I remember thinking, why would that be? You know, I saw the research and I thought, that's wacky. Why would that be so? And then I thought about it. Makes sense, right? My body was rewarding me for doing what's good on an evolutionary basis. I'm helping other people. That's going to be good for all humans. If humans learn to help each other, that's a good thing. If I learn to help Shannon, my body says, good job, Judy. You just did a good thing. So I get my immune system feels good about it. So isn't it nice? Something to balance the hard stuff of caregiving. I think that's a helpful thing to know. Is to me, and very interesting. So back to grief again. Something I wanted to bring up in the last couple of minutes is the importance of ritual. So assuming that there are lots of ways to grieve, honoring that. Assuming that I don't know how long it'll take. Understanding that how much we grieve may have a lot to do with how deeply we love. And that thinking about the small losses that may be occurring now, either in ourselves or if we're caring for someone else with a long-term illness, understanding those illnesses and grieving those losses that come up in those early on is actually a healthy adaptation, right? You don't want to like muscle through everything. You want to be able to say, oh my gosh, this is hard right now. That's a useful thing to do. Doesn't mean you have to wallow in self-pity, right? It means being able to say, this is hard. That's all it means. Yeah. And then can I say something to myself that's nurturing, that's helpful? Instead of like, oh no, it's just me. I really messed up, or this is so terrible. You know, I could do that, but I could also say, hey, Judy, this is really hard, but you know what? I know you can get through this. I know you can. I know you can. That's what I would say to a best friend. Wouldn't it be nice to say that to myself? It's really important. I want to mention the idea of rituals. And I say that because, big word, but I want to suggest it in an everyday way. What are everyday rituals that might be really helpful for me? What can I do when I experience something sad or a loss in my life, whether it's at work or whether it's at home? Do I do anything that's a ritual? I remember once, this is something I felt was very big. I lost a beloved dog, maybe about 4 years ago. And one of my best friends said to me, do you want to have a memorial? I said, what? Yeah, can you believe I said that? As soon as she said it, I said, what? And at the same time, I felt like, yeah, I want to do that. You know, so can we do something? You know, for me, maybe because I live in California, I could go to the beach. That's a place I love. But what else could it be? I work with a doctor. He folds little origami cranes for every patient that dies. And he works in palliative care. There've been a lot of deaths over the years. But when he folds the crane, what do you think happens for him at night? He remembers the person. It takes a little while to fold one of those origami cranes. You can't just, it's not a one and done in 2 seconds. He's got to sit there for maybe at least a minute or two doing it. And he remembers and he honors and he wishes the person in his own heart, he wishes them safe passage, safe transition, in whatever that way that might mean for them. These kinds of things are so important, right? And if we can do it with someone, we can make it even more important. If we can write something, can we write someone a letter about the losses that may be occurring now? Not to give to them, I wouldn't give it to somebody else, but here are the things I miss about you. Or if it's someone that's already died, then it's okay to write it and leave the letter around. So for someone that's still living, that's just for you. These are the things I miss about you, not to tell them. It's so that we can acknowledge it. Because when we do, it helps us. Right? It helps us. And it allows us to move forward in a way. How do I want to be informed by this difficult experience, whether it's actual grief or whether it's our own illness? So we have talked about so many huge topics, and I know that. So I want to thank you for hanging in. It's been lovely to meet you. And I don't know what is possible, Shannon, in terms of staying on a couple extra minutes if people have questions, because I've done a lot of the talking because I had things I really wanted to cover, but I didn't mean to be keeping people more silent than I usually think.
It was lovely. Thank you so much, Judy, first of all, just for your wisdom and your calming presence, and just all, everything you had to share with us as far as tips and things that we can utilize in our own lives. So really wonderful. And I can see in the chat that many people are feeling the same way. So really great. I am totally fine to stay on for any questions and answer session here. Shall we go ahead and try for that? Do you want to just do, if somebody waves and then they can unmute themselves? Okay, Elizabeth, go ahead and unmute.
Oh, you're muted still, Elizabeth. You have to unmute.
We can't hear you.
Oops.
Maybe, did she just disappear?
She
might
probably
have.
was trying to unmute and accidentally disappeared. Oh, I'm
Oh,
sorry.
bummer.
Yeah. Okay.
Anyone else have any questions for Judy? That's a lot to absorb. Really wonderful things. And it's great that we recorded it so people can watch it again, and those who missed it can see it again. Someone had written to me, Judy, privately. They were asking for the contact information for the UCSF PD supportive care clinic. And so maybe you and I can email, and then I can provide that in the follow-up email to everyone.
Okay. Actually, I can tell you here
Okay,
that,
perfect.
that I'm sorry, I didn't think to say it when I mentioned it. That was part of a study, and the study has ended. So that
Oh.
clinic's not there now.
Got it.
I wish it were. I wish it were. Yeah. So.
Okay, was a study. Got it. And so there's someone, Martha, who I believe left. She is in San Diego. They're interested to expand into palliative work, and they want to research what UCSF did in that arena, I think. So
I'm not sure what that person does in their work.
let's see. Martha, it looks like she's part of the San Diego PD support group system down there.
Yeah. So why don't I make a suggestion for you offline on that? But I'm thinking, I don't really know as a support group member, what she'd be able to do. I think palliative care is great and it's enormously useful. And I strongly recommend it for anyone because I think it provides layers of support that are not typically available just one-on-one. Not that one-on-one care isn't good, it is, but the palliative care is so beautiful because you get a whole team of people there to support you in all the things that are going on. And that's so amazingly wonderful. So in the San Diego area, I think the best thing to do is just to check in with some of the docs that work in neuropalliative care and ask them about it. I don't know. I'm trying to remember where she is. Is she LA or San Diego? I can think of two people in Southern California, but I'm not certain where they're located. And I can, Shannon, if you would remind me by email, I can let you know their names and you can.
Perfect.
Perhaps
And I
pass
can
them
include
on.
that. That's great. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Freddie.
I do have one question. We've been having a lot of issues like community stuff that's been going on. That's kind of hard to deal with. Earlier in about 6 weeks ago, we had a shooting at a grocery store.
Oh,
and
sorry.
And then again, recently, a couple weeks ago, we had a young kid that was killed by a vehicle, and it's just a couple minutes away. And when you're saying to notice the things that, when it's hard, how do you deal with that as far as community goes? I know on a one-to-one, I've had a lot of experience with that one, but when the community gets to be too much, how do you do the breathing, the grounding, the breathing?
For yourself, you mean?
Yeah. And
Yeah.
you see it in our community, people around, they're just like too heightened up, and
Yeah.
it gets a little scary to drive around and
Yeah.
be around other people at that point.
Yeah. There's a term that the social psychologists or psychologists like to use sometimes called being hypervigilant. Have you heard that term?
Hmm.
It's like too many dangerous things are happening, so you get on alert and you're on alert all the time. That may be the sort of thing that you're seeing, a lot of people feeling, and it may be hard for them to come down if they're feeling not safe in general in the world
Hmm.
because too many things are happening. I think it's a difficult situation. Yes, I do think for yourself, I think the breathing in for me and out for you is an amazing practice, and the grounding, because it'll help you come down from that, because we're empathic. When people around us are hypervigilant, what do you think happens to us? We kind of mirror that to some degree, and that can be basically not helpful. That's the simplest way I can put it. It doesn't help if I see that you're triggered. It doesn't help if I get triggered too. That's not a useful thing. So in my own life, I would try to start calming myself. And if I could share some of those kinds of practices, I don't know if you do this, Freddie, but if you have family, or if you have a group that you lead, to help people find ways into calming their own nervous systems and hearts so that they can come down a little bit and feel okay. I think that's a really useful thing. For the community itself, there may just be some time, some space needed for people to begin to heal. And if you had all of them in your living room, the whole community, then maybe you could think about some things. But since you don't, it's that old dictum, I guess, where I joke with people sometimes and say, if I'm in the room with someone else, there's only one of the people in that room that I can change. This one. Yeah. So it helps to remember that, though. It just to know that your job is to calm yourself, and to know that empathically someone else will be around you when you're calmer than you would have been. So that will indirectly help them by default. That's what they'll be seeing. That's what their empathic resonance is going to mirror, is your calmness. That will help them. I mean, real calmness. I don't mean make believe. Just if you're able to settle yourself a bit, then they'll be able to get that.
I think you've modeled that for us today, Judy. I think,
Okay.
I don't know how everyone else feels, but I feel super calm
Oh,
after being
okay.
with you for the last hour and a half. And so that's just, an example of the way that we absorb, even through the screen,
Oh,
energy,
yeah.
transmit energy. So firmly believe in that. Mhm.
Thank you, Shannon. Thank you so much for saying that. Are there any other thoughts or questions or comments for that matter?
Thank you very much for the tools. It has really been helpful, and it's a good reminder to know that yes, we can, in the situations that we're living in, breathe through this stuff. And I used to think that everything, it's just temporary, and even this too is temporary. So when I was a caregiver for my husband, I used to have to remember to breathe, because you're just waiting for the next shoe to drop. And that's something that I really have to remind myself, is to breathe. So this is a good tool, and thank you for the reminder.
Great. I'm so glad. Thanks, Freddie. Okay. Well, this has sure been a pleasure. Thank you so much, Shannon, and
Thank you.
Rachel and Kelly and all of you. It's so great to be with you. And Mary, thank you. I got your note. Yeah.
Excellent. We really appreciate it, Judy. Thank you again. And I will be in touch with you so we can provide some more resources for those California folks.
Great. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
everyone.
Thanks,
Have a
everyone.
great rest of your Monday. We'll see you next time. Thank you. Thank
Bye.
you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.